Hi and welcome to Innovators number 13. 1996 was the year that hip-hop changed. No longer was it acceptable to throw down a James Brown loop, play some other drum machine loops over the top and lay down a rap. Innovator 13's debut album forced the hip-hop landscape to change by recontextualizing what hip-hop was and what it could be. As argued on the NPR Music website, in 1996, a 24-year-old from the suburbs of San Francisco released a hip-hop record that changed perceptions not only of hip-hop, but also recorded music at large. A review of that debut album from the Guardian newspaper by David Benham at the time stated Innovator 13 lovingly creates exquisite tracks from the simplest of elements. His breakbeats are slow and stately, but never ponderous. He overlays them with chords of such limpid dignity they could have come from Handel, and to judge by the breadth of his sources, they probably have. Sampling is a key aesthetic in hip-hop, and as argued by Elliot Wilder, Innovator 13 took elements of hip-hop, funk, rock, ambient, psychedelia, as well as found sounds, oddball spoken word clips, and cut-out bin nuggets, a literal sweep of sounds that exist on planet Earth, and then wrote the ultimate lesson. From that debut in 1996, Innovator number 13 has never stood still. His back catalogue of work stands as an ever-evolving development of musical styles under a broad banner of hip-hop, and certainly it's very difficult to predict what music will come next. I'd like to introduce Innovator number 13, DJ Shadow. Born in 1972, Josh DJ Shadow Davis had already been experimenting with making beats and breaks on a 4-track recorder while he was in high school in the NorCal college town of Davis. But it was during university that he co-founded his own Soul Sides label as an outlet for his original tracks. Hooking up with friends including eventual Soul Sides artists Black Alicious and Lyrics Born through the college radio station, Shadow began releasing the hip-hop reconstruction mixtapes in 1991, eventually catching the attention of The Source magazine and Dave Funkin Klein. Shadow was featured in the magazine's Unsigned Hype column in 1991, and Klein signed him to a production deal with Hollywood Basic Records. The Unsigned Hype column stated, "All in all, Shadow's got beats, fat drum fills, swift cuts and the skills to synthesize his sound nicely." Although he would become known as a master of the sampler, the mix he submitted was constructed without one, with all cuts and samples played in via turntable. After purchasing an Akai MPC 60 in 1992, Shadow also provided beats and scratches for Bay Area rapper Paris and was featured on his second album. An earlier adopter of the MPC, Shadow continued to develop his skills producing tapes on his 4-track recorder and sending them out to labels like Tommy Boy. However, he was seen as too out there for most labels to want to sign him. His beat production was different from others, punching in rhythms on the MPC like a drummer, sampled from multiple records, with layered ambience and scratching. Dave Klein's faith in Shadow would be rewarded when Shadow's production for Zimbabwe Legit, called The Legitimate Mix, was released. Previous tracks written by Shadow were very b-boy orientated, using breaks that were more upbeat. However, The Legitimate Mix was the first track to showcase a new interpretation of hip-hop and present a style that would become synonymous with the DJ Shadow sound to come, i.e. slower tempos and much more atmospheric. While building his skills as both a DJ and producer, in 1993, Shadow pressed his 17-minute Beathead symphony, Entropy. Send Them Entropy was a double A-side featuring Asia Born on the A-side with Entropy, a 7-part idea, on the double A-side. Pressed on his own Soul Sides imprint, the EP was released in limited quantities, but word began to spread further about this new DJ producer. His tracks spread widely through the DJ Strong hip-hop underground, eventually reaching James Lavelle of Mowax Records. Mowax was known as an acid jazz label, however Lavelle wanted Shadow to record for him. His first single for Mowax was In Flux. As Shadow stated in Elliot Wilder's book, Introducing, it was the first record with non-jazzy leanings that James put out. This was then followed by the Lost and Found EP, in 1994. Shadow's first full-length album, Introducing, was released on the label in late 1996 to immense critical acclaim in Britain and America. The album has frequently been lauded as one of the most important works of the last 50 years, landing on countless Best of the 90s lists and polls, including Rolling Stone and the NME. The NPR website states, "Introducing, the full-length debut of the producer DJ Shadow, was constructed almost entirely from samples of pre-existing recordings and was perhaps the first such album to reach a wide audience." Introducing is a collage of sound. In the words of Elliot Wilder, it's a lucid fantasia culling several decades worth of forgotten beats, disembodied radio signals, and unclaimed melodies. It is a record that not just makes everything old and new again, it also opens wide a fresh yet curiously recognisable dimension. In the same NPR interview, Shadow says, "The instrument that I grew up wanting to play is the sampler, and it's the instrument I took seriously in terms of becoming the best at it, or one of the best." Shadow wasn't just taking loops from other records, but rather the individual drum hits themselves. So, for example, Shadow's Lesson 4 track features samples from over 80 records contained within the 8-minute running time. As Shadow explained in his interview for creators on the Vice website, "On Stem, for example, the day that I mixed the song, I just happened to have Run's House in the studio. I just took the kick and the snare from the extended drum outro, Run's House, or that bonus beat on the 12-inch, and just programmed it the way I would imagine a punk drummer would play." Throughout Introducing, DJ Shadow redefines the break precisely in his manipulation of it, just like a human drummer does, extending and changing rhythm structures. In his thesis behind the beat, Michael Derrico states that DJ Shadow uses the Akai MPC sampler as an extension of the turntable by utilising technical and compositional processes that blur the distinction between the two. He also argues, in creatively expanding upon the limitations of the turntable and the MPC, Shadow's performance practice and aesthetic reflects the technically subversive logic behind instrumental hip-hop composition. A basic overview of the MPC 60 is that it is a sampler first and foremost, and once a sound is sampled it can be trimmed to various lengths, chopped up and assigned to any of the 16 rubber pads on the front interface for live playback. The device contains a total of 2 pad banks, 16 pads per bank, resulting in a total of 32 possible samples at a time. There's also a built-in sequencer that allows for overdubbing and layering of different performances played on the pads. Known as a crate digger extraordinaire, what marked out Shadow from his peers was his choice of samples. Here was someone prepared to trawl through hundreds of obscure records to find a sample that few would have heard previously. As he said in an interview with Elliot Wilder, "I was trying to find a sound different from everybody else's, so the source material had to be different from everybody else's." In the same interview, Shadow stated, "When I sample something, it's because there's something ingenious about it, and if it isn't the whole group as a whole, it's that song. Or, even if it isn't the song as a whole, it's a genius moment or an accident or something that makes it just utterly unique to the other trillions of hours of records that I've ploughed through." As Simon Reynolds argues in his book Retromania, DJ Shadow pushed underground hip-hop's crate-digging ethos right up front. Or as Cut Chemist put it in the film Scratch, DJ Shadow is the king of digging, and has a spidey sense when it comes to finding records with useful samples, sounds or beats. 1998 saw Shadow produce tracks for the debut album by Uncle, essentially James Lavelle from Mowax and a production crew, that featured guests including Tom York of Radiohead, Richard Ashcroft of The Verve, Mike D of the Beastie Boys, amongst many others. Dorian Linsky's review in Mixmag at the time stated, "The big stars are Radiohead's Tom York and The Verve's Richard Ashcroft, but DJ Shadow's production makes them part of the album's flow, presenting them as characters in the album's story rather than moonlighting megastars." The album garnered great reviews, and as Emily Yoshida says on the Verge website, Uncle pioneered the contemporary star-studded collaboration album, and their debut LP, Science Fiction, was an instant classic, selling over 1 million copies. Shadow's following albums and EPs would challenge the audience he'd gained from his debut releases. Still hip-hop, his musical output would begin to incorporate other forms of instrumentation other than the turntable and the MPC, and as such his styles and techniques would also adapt. But like any musicologist, and really that's what he is through his finding and choice of samples, his breadth and knowledge of musical styles or genres increases and in turn informs his own music production. The follow-up to Introducing, The Private Press, was titled accordingly, as many samples were taken from non-commercially released records, such as recordio discs, where in the 1940s and 50s people could record themselves in a booth, resulting in a private press vinyl. His 2006 album, The Outsider, focused on San Francisco Bay Area's hi-fi sound, distinguished by its gritty pounding rhythms. As he stated in Rolling Stone magazine when discussing his album from 2016, The Mountain Will Fall, I started to realise that the way I think about sound and also the way I view a lot of contemporary platforms to create sound, to me there's 3 distinct disciplines when it comes to sound. One is the sample vocabulary, one is the live instrumentation vocabulary, and the third is synthetic sound vocabulary, like drum machine, software synths, vintage synths. Once I realised all of them were essentially the same when it came to me sampling, it opened me up to being able to utilise whatever I wanted, and especially with the knowledge that in doing so, I would be able to have my music occupy a much wider frequency range. So why Innovator number 13? DJ Shadow opened up hip-hop and showed what it could be and what it truly could encompass, moving it forward from the West Coast sound that had been dominating the scene from the early 1990s. Introducing was a groundbreaking release, having huge impact on the downtempo and trip-hop genres, spawning what became termed as backpack or underground hip-hop, and also influencing the Los Angeles low-end theory scene that would spawn artists like Flying Lotus. As Shadow said himself in Bill Brewster and Frank Broughton's book, The Record Players DJ Revolutionaries, it's hard for me to imagine that what I make isn't hip-hop, but at the same time I'm at the age where I'm not interested in restricting myself to one style or one scene or genre. As Michael Derico states, with Introducing, DJ Shadow reveals an existentially divided self. His virtuosic mastery and integration of various technologies have gained him respect and legitimacy as an agent of positive change in the hip-hop underground. Yet this striving for progress is continually balanced by the very real social and musical ethics of creativity and performance that his somewhat purist tradition imbues. Peter Shapiro writes of the album as a melancholic journey through hip-hop's short history that showed both how much had been gained and how much had been lost. Elliot Wilder's argument is, what resonated about Introducing when it was released in 1996 and what it makes still resonate today is the way in which it loosens itself from the mooring of the known and sails off into an uncharted territory that seems to exist both in and out of time. The final word is Shadow's from his interview in Rolling Stone magazine in 2016. I guess the only thing I can say is that I'm still incredibly grateful for the impact that it had. Being a student of music and reading about other artists and their aspirations, I know how difficult it is to connect in a meaningful way, and have a record that endures for 20 years the way this one has, so I know how lucky I am. I know how grateful I am every day that I managed to achieve that at least once in my lifetime. Thanks for watching. See you next time.